Listen to the vibes.
The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes, and I am very pleased to have all the way from the UK author Nick Pease, and he's also a spiritual medium, and we're going to talk about his book and talk about him in general, but I'm just going to let him talk a little bit about himself. So how are you today, sir?
Excellent. Thanks, Kyle. And it's a real pleasure to be with you today. So I'm delighted. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm really pleased to be here. Yeah, I'll tell you a bit about myself. I am a spiritual medium. In fact, from a very early age of about 5, maybe 6, probably more like 5, I could hear spirit beings. And I readily admit it terrified the life out of me because, of course, I didn't know what on earth was going on. But that set me on a chain of life events that made me really want to understand what this is all about. Because why could I hear these spirit beings from another dimension? What was that about? It seemed to go against everything I was being taught in a very conventional way through my upbringing at school and all the rest of it, and what conventional religions were teaching us. And I wanted to really find out more. So that led me on a whole path where I later in my teens, I could actually see spirits as well. And I began to develop as a medium. I got a degree in philosophy because I wanted to put everything under a microscope. Philosophy as a discipline is one of the most ruthless analytical forensic studies of what knowledge is. And I wanted to do that to really understand what the nature of existence was about. I then sat in circle at the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain in London, developed as a fully blown spiritual medium. And my whole life has been one of searching for the truth, if you like. I don't actually call myself a spiritualist as such, Kyle, funnily enough, because I find labels are so divisive. If you have a label, you seem to, there are people who just oppose anything that isn't of their label. And so I oppose that. I'd rather be thought of as a free thinker, somebody who's just searching after truth. And I've done that all my life. I don't pretend to know all the answers at all. I'm still searching, but I take an active interest in scientific developments and spiritual developments, religious developments, and the dichotomies that can arise between them. And I guess that's what actually brought me to write my book, Revelation. Although it is a thriller novel, and you can read it at face value and just take it as a thriller, there's a lot of spiritual philosophy in there. There's a lot of scientific, religious, political, everything. It brings everything together and poses the question, what would happen if somebody could create a device that would 100% prove life after death as a scientific fact? And I find that absolutely fascinating, because the more we understand about energy as being what makes up the whole universe, the closer we're getting to recognizing that the spirit dimensions are purely energy. We take that energy with us when we pass over. And so it's quite possible in my mind that one day somebody will develop a machine of some sort that will actually pick up spirit vibrations. So that was the tenet behind the whole book, but we could talk more about that as we get into it. But that's a very quick introduction to who I am and why I wrote the book.
Well, you bring up a point that I've always made about why we experience paranormal activity and things like that, is that I've always said that, since it's scientifically proven you can't create or destroy energy, you can only transfer it.
That's exactly right, Kyle, and that's the whole tenet of it. You cannot destroy energy. Einstein proved that for us. And so
we're made of energy.
We are energy. Everything in the universe is energy. And this is what fascinates me, because the whole point of the book Revelation is that these two scientists, quite by accident, create a machine that can pick up energetic vibration on the frequency that spirit existence exists. And I remember going back to when I developed as a spiritual medium, one of the things we had to do when we went into our silence in meditation in our circle was to lower our vibration as much as we could. Ironically, it's the other way around, to allow that spirit vibration to communicate with us. But it's all energetic, as you say.
Now, quick question for you, because I've had somebody tell me that I have abilities, and since I was a child, I would hear a voice. Okay.
Yeah.
But to me, and even as a small child, I always kind of played it off as it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But yet I could hear somebody call my name or say something, whatever, and it would be real quick and then it was gone. I never attributed that to having abilities. I don't claim to have any abilities, but I will say I spent some time in a special home for people that hear voices because I was experiencing that, and they were saying things basically to tell me to harm myself and whatnot. And so that's what scared me. And then I found out that the place I was living was actually kind of a portal or a doorway, because there was a cemetery right down the block from me.
Yeah.
I mean, I could 2 minutes from my front door, I could walk into the cemetery.
Yeah.
So how did you, I mean, was that kind of what you experienced? Was you just heard the voice, or what was it like for you?
You touch on big subjects there, Kyle, because obviously, yes, everybody has that ability. And indeed, in childhood, a lot of kids do hear things, see things. They have so-called imaginary friends. They're told not to be so silly and everything, whereas actually those innate psychic gifts are with us all. And the ancient cultures totally understood that and lived very close to nature, very close to spirit. They saw spirit in everything, in nature, and believed, as I do absolutely, that there is absolutely nothing wrong in that, in having that communication. The note of caution there is that obviously there are darker energies out there, and you do need to be careful. And one of the things about when you develop as a medium, if you do it properly and you do it under controlled situations, as I did at the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain, is that you have to learn how to protect yourself and to block out those darker energies, because otherwise they will be attracted to the light and they will try and influence you, and it can happen. But unfortunately, there's so much ignorance in the world about this and about what really is going on that people will jump to the wrong conclusions and just say, well, they're lunatics or whatever it might be.
That's what I thought I was.
Yeah. And they will take you off to some home or whatever it might be, rather than try and really understand what's going on. So yeah, there are darker forces out there, but if you learn to protect yourself, you meditate and develop in the right way, you can control it. And in terms of the light, the light forces that are out there, the good, as it were, it's beautiful, and it is our birthright to be able to have that communication. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's very, very beautiful. But that's why in my book Revelation, you do find that struggle, because the people who invent it, quite by accident, when they take it to those in power, before it's become in the public domain that they've made this incredible discovery, there are those in power, both politically and religious and in other ways, who are worried about it in that way. There is still that sort of force against things that are unknown or that are understood, that are outside the status quo. People feel challenged by it and want to close it down. So that's why we get this amazing story, this thrilling roller coaster of events, where there are those who want to destroy the machine and the inventors, and how they stay ahead of the game and ultimately bring it to the public domain if they can. I'm not going to give too much away. Is the nature of the story. So it's very much why I wrote Revelation, was to root it in exactly the things you're talking about. The fact that everything is energy, and that if you could create a machine to pick up energetic vibrations in that way, then you could prove life after death. And it touches on so many fascinating subjects. I find the whole thing absolutely fascinating, and I'm still striving for greater truths. But yeah, you're right, Kyle. You have to be careful. There are darker forces out there.
Do we get life lessons from reading this book?
I hope so. I mean, I've made it into a thriller novel, so you can read it and just enjoy it as hopefully a great thriller. There's a lot of action in it. There's romance, there's humor, there's all the sort of ingredients that I would hope make a great thriller. But yes, you're absolutely right. I've drawn upon my entire life experience of learning. So there's a lot of spiritual philosophy in there. There's philosophy in there. There's scientific developments, allusions to things that have happened in science that people will think, wow, I never thought of it that way before. Yeah. As obviously religious aspects as well, into how this would affect religious movements, how they would react to it. So it's bringing together all these fascinating elements and saying, actually, what would happen? I mean, life after death fascinates all of us. We all at some point in our lives, we all say, what am I doing here? What's this all about? This crazy world we live in. There's got to be more to it than that. And the incredible number of stories every year, millions upon millions of people have experiences of hearing, seeing spirits. Many of those people will be downright skeptical to it, will be frightened of it, will have their own agendas that they don't want to go there, which is absolutely fine. I'm not going to preach to anybody either way. But just one of those, just one, has to be true to prove that life after death is an absolute fact.
Right.
So yeah, there are a lot of things in the book which you can get out of it and actually make you think, I'd always thought that, I'd always wondered about that. You know, if life after death, which does fascinate us all, well, what if somebody could prove it 100% to be a scientific fact? At the moment, the best you could do is go off and see a medium or something, and maybe the evidence will be good for you, maybe it won't, but it'll always leave you wondering. But if it could be 100% scientifically proven, how would the world react? And that's the fascinating question that Revelation poses, and says, well, read this book, see how they do react, see what happens, see how some people really react in a very dangerous and bad way, other people react in a fantastic, uplifting way. Who wins out in the end?
Well,
read
you know,
the book.
as you know, I do two different shows. One of them is positivity based, and the other one is paranormal. And I could have easily done this on my paranormal show.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
I kind of bring a little bit more of my spiritual stuff to my positivity channel. Because I like alternative ways of thinking. You know, whether it be, you know, your religious beliefs, what have you. I used to be a preacher, was, you know, very much into the Baptist religion, but I kind of got away from religion in general, and I became more spiritual because I felt like every church that I went to had an agenda from man behind it instead of from God.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I try to spend my I'm sorry, but you know, I try to spend my time meditating and talking to God to get closer to Him, to become more spiritual, to get onto that higher plane, you know, the higher frequency, and not so much of well, this guy here says you gotta, you know, stand upside down and you know, be able to flip a coin 5 times before you can go to heaven, kind of stuff. You know, don't tell me. I want to believe what God says, not what, you know, man says. Am I going to get that kind of spirituality when I read the book?
Absolutely, you are 100%. There's a lot of that in it, which says, I mean, from my own personal perspective, I respect all religions. I respect all people for their individual beliefs.
Oh, of course.
And I'm not here to tell people to believe one thing or another. And I think there's a lot of good in religions, some of the work they do. Equally,
well, we need something to believe in.
Yeah, but equally, it can cause divisions. You only have to look around the world to see some of the wars and conflicts that are going on that are at heart based on a division of religion, to see what the problems are. But one of the things that really attracted me to the more spiritual path as I was developing in my much earlier years, was when the guides and helpers come through from spirit, they would say, if anything we tell you offends your reason, reject it. And having been brought up very conventionally, this was an absolute wonderful moment for me, because I thought, at last, people are prepared to say, reject anything. Don't just listen to it. As you rightly say, just because I'm telling you to stand on your head or do whatever, don't just take that at face value. Find your own truth. And I often say to people, hopefully you'll read Revelation and get a lot of that spiritual philosophy out of it, but you make your own mind up. I think people find their own truth in life, and I would never try to say to people, believe this or don't believe that, or whatever it might be. As the guides and helpers used to say to me when I was very young and developing, you find your own truth. You reject anything if it offends your reason. We're not going to tell you this is right and this is wrong. And I think that's one of the things that always attracted me to spirituality. They never come to judge. They don't come to wag their finger and say, you will burn in hell, or you will go to heaven, or whatever it might be. There's nothing like that to them. It's everybody is loved. Love is the overriding force in our lives, in our whole existence. Why can't we see more of this? There seems to be so much division and people wanting to pursue their own agendas at the expense of others.
Exactly.
And actually saying, hang on a minute, all the great leaders, whoever you like to look at, whether it's the great religious prophets, whether it's modern day sort of John Lennon types or whatever it might be, without wanting to sound trivial about it, but it's they've all preached the same thing. They've all said the same thing: love one another, do good things to one another, look after the planet, look after the animals, look after other people. Surely shouldn't that be our creed? Shouldn't that be what we follow? And that's what I've tried to put into Revelation, a lot of that kind of great positivity and really uplifting messages within this thrilling story of actually people trying to stay alive because there are people trying to kill them because of what they've invented. So it all comes together, and I think and hope, and those who've already read it seem to have enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, I would love to see the world become a little bit more selfless instead of self-centered.
Yeah.
When the way we were raised was that you did for other people.
Yeah.
If say my neighbor was trying to get groceries out of the car, and there were an older couple, and then I was out there and my parents didn't see me go offer to help, I was going to get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now it's just keep to yourself, and that's sad the way the world is today.
It is sad. It's very sad. And of course, litigation has contributed to that as well, because if you get involved and something goes wrong, you're going to find yourself on the wrong end of a lawsuit, etc. It's a pretty crazy world we live in many ways. And that's why I would hope we rediscover more of the spirituality that was always within us as our birthright and was always understood by many of the ancient cultures until they literally had it beaten out of them. And a lot of that is also in Revelation, in my book Revelation. I'm taking a very wide perspective on spiritual knowledge, spiritual philosophy, and how it fits in with this thriller story. So yeah, it's all there.
Yeah, that's going to be the downfall of this planet, is the fact that everybody is all about me, self-centered, don't want to help other people. And you were talking about the labels a while ago, how much we fought for all those years to not be labeled, and now people are wanting to be labeled. I don't get it. It's all about the self now. Yeah,
absolutely. And you're right, we are in a bit of a race against time to stop things before they get out of control. I think that's one of the other aspects of writing Revelation, was that for me, once you accept the reality of life after death, and for me, I had no choice, Kyle, because obviously when you could hear spirits from birth, and then you're seeing them in your teens and thereafter, you can't get away from it. To me, it's just a reality. It's the same as 2 + 2 = 4. The spirit world to me is 100% real. But I accept, until you have that experience for yourself, it's very hard to just, and why should you accept it just because somebody says? Then you're back in the realms of dogma and creeds and all the rest of it. And I fight against all that. I want people to be free thinkers.
Yes.
But if you do recognize that there is life after death, there is a greater dimension to this life, there is greater purpose to this life, that your life here matters because you take those lessons with you into the spirit world, then surely it puts this earthly existence into perspective. And you start to think, well, with that in mind, I really should live a better life. I should look after other people and everything. And I have a great respect for people like the Native Americans, for example, who see spirit in everything and would never take out of Mother Earth, as they called it, more than they could put back in, and respected the animals, respected one another. Of course, nobody is perfect. They would fight each other, and that's the human condition, not for land, because they don't believe you can own land, but for horses or whatever it might be. But that kind of spirituality where you are seeing a greater purpose, a greater good, and then you start to look after other people. You start to think, I really need to live life the best I can, and I will take that with me into the spiritual dimensions. None of us are perfect.
No, by no means.
You know, we all have our flaws and everything, but if we have that spiritual perspective, so Revelation, and you'll see towards the end of the book, has that very life-affirming message that if this really was brought to the public domain, that people recognized the greater spirituality that is within us and around us, it would make us hopefully live life in a very different way. And what you were talking about there, where people are more self, would actually be overturned, and people would say, you know what, we're part of something much bigger, and we've got to take that perspective. And that's where the science as well comes into the book as well. The religion comes into the book. I mean, I make references only in passing within the structure of the story to things like the fact that it's only some 400 years ago that Galileo actually said to people, hang on a minute, guys, everything isn't going around the earth. We aren't the be all and end all of everything. We're not the center of the universe. We're part of something much bigger. We're part of the Copernican system. And he was brought before the Holy Inquisition at pains of recanting his views because it went against what everybody believed. That's just 400 years ago. That's nothing. It's the bat of an eyelid. And this is what happens in the world, that when people do try to say, hang on a minute, things are a little bit different to your status quo, the way you want to see the world, people get frightened, people get defensive, people get aggressive. And that's why all these elements are imbued in my story and actually making people think, because I think, and I've had this feedback from a lot of people who've read it, have said, wow, I'd always thought that. I'd always had those thoughts. I'd always imagined something like that. And now you've put it in writing and it all sort of hangs together. So there's a lot of elements in there. And as I say, Kyle, it's drawing on all my spiritual knowledge and life's learning to put it all into the book, but within a framework of a story, which is just great fun to read.
Now, a lot of people that I've had on the show, they have their different thoughts on the afterlife. One of them, which I kind of buy into, is that when you are given a specific task in your spiritual journey, if you do not complete that journey, then you are meant to come back until you get it done. Let's put it that way. What is your belief on that?
I think there's a lot of truth in that. The whole subject of reincarnation is vast. I happen to accept it because I've seen and met people who've had the most incredible stories, which can only be explained in that way. But again, I'm still searching for truth in that respect. But I think that is true. I think life is very varied. We all come into this world with a certain path, as it were. And there are things that we are brought here to do. If we don't do them, yes, I think you will have to come back and do it again. Sometimes it happens within your own lifetime. I've had that within myself where I've tried to avoid difficult decisions in one or two areas, and boy, did they bring me back to face them big time in a couple of years later or something. So it can happen in your lifetime, or it happens that you have to come back if it's a big part of a plan. It's not to say that life is predetermined in that sense. There are things that are kind of shown and they're part of your path, and that experiences and people you will meet and everything, which is part of what your life experience should be. But if you don't, because you have free will, you can avoid them, like I tried to in one instance, or you can steer around them or do whatever you want to do. But if they are big lessons that are part of your spiritual development, chances are you will be brought round either in this existence or in a later existence to face them again. And it's not to say that life is a bed of roses. It isn't for anybody. It has its ups and downs. We will all lose people, which obviously hurts us immensely at the time. Some of us will go through great illnesses, etc. Others will win the lottery and have great riches and whatever. There is no rhyme or reason to it in that sense. Everybody is living their life individually to the best that they can. We're all beautiful spiritual individuals brought here for a purpose. We're all connected through the universal energy that connects us all. And I think the more we can understand that and recognize that we are all one, then we start to work as one. And then we're very, very powerful. The human spirit is incredible because it is spirit. And when the human spirit is motivated, amazing things can happen. And I'm an optimist. I truly believe and hope that we will rediscover more spirituality in whatever way people want to do that. I hope it's in a free thinking way and not aligned to one particular line of thought or anything, but just an acceptance of greater spirituality. And that through that, we could start to address more of the problems that beset us, whether it be environmental issues, whether it be the issues of why on earth are we still waging wars against each other for land. It's madness, and there needs to be a big wake up. And I've often thought that somehow in the world, whether it's the 100% discovery and proof of life after death as a fact, whether it's somebody coming down from outer space and saying, you know what, there is other dimensions out there, there are people living out there on other planets in advanced civilizations, there needs to be a great wake-up call for mankind to actually say, you know what, it's a bit like Galileo saying, wake up guys, we're part of something much bigger, and that has implications for our lives. I truly hope that that happens. Maybe not in my lifetime, but we shall see.
Well, it's kind of a cyclical thing, because you'll see that we'll go through this. I mean, it's almost like everybody wants to go to church or get into religion, and then all of a sudden everybody wants to part from it, and then we go back to it, and just it's back and forth all the time. Like they say, the pendulum always swings the other direction. And me personally, I hope that I get my lesson this time around, because I don't want to come back. I think I've had enough.
yeah.
And anyway, I had a quick question for you before I forget. Now, the reasoning behind writing the book. Now, do you actually get the inspiration from the spirits, or is it just your own curiosity into that what is after we die? What comes after we die?
It's a bit of both, Kyle, because obviously growing up and developing as a spiritual medium and everything, that's very much a part of my life. I'm always living life and thinking about spiritual things and the reality of it. And I recognize, as most people will have, that you are given so much by spirit, whether it's in your waking life, whether it's in dreams, however it might be, those ideas that we get. And when you develop spiritually, you begin to not only recognize that they're coming from spirit, but you become more attuned to it, and then it flows much quicker. Now, when I got the idea for Revelation, I had this idea for the book, the basic sort of storyline. I actually wrote the whole thing, the basic kernel of the story, in a week. I had a little notepad. I wasn't at my computer, and I literally sat there, and within a week, scribbling away, I wrote the whole story with the main characters and everything. I obviously went back and edited thereafter. That's what takes the time process.
Right.
But the actual story, and I couldn't write fast enough. It was as if somebody had taken over my hand, and I was writing as fast as I could because the ideas and everything was coming so fast. And I understood completely at that time that I was being spirit inspired. There's no question about it. So I owe them a lot of royalties. It is, I mean, a lot of people will attest to that because they know when they're spirit inspired. I know musicians, for example, people who've woken up in the middle of the night and they've been given a song.
Oh yeah.
And there are some quite famous examples of that. People who have written #1 hits who said it came from, whether it was their mother or whoever it might have been in spirit, gave them the whole thing. Somebody who might, I mean, I could list countless examples, but I won't list the famous ones because I'll probably get into trouble. But there are many examples of that. Musicians, artists, writers, people who touch the creative arts, who know very well that they are being inspired by spirit. Some are too frightened to admit it because all of us are open to ridicule. We know that people love to say, oh, you know, you're away with the fairies or something. They love to pour scorn on it. But it's a fact. It's an absolute fact. And what I've often said to people is that there's nothing wrong with touching spirit. There's nothing wrong with being in communication with spirit. They come through with love. As I say, they never come through to judge or anything. They're happy to communicate with us. It's not a sin. It's not wrong. It's not the occult or anything like that. There are darker forces. And yes, you do have to be careful. As I said earlier, you have to learn how to protect yourself. But spirit communication, again, as I said earlier, the ancients understood it's perfectly natural. We are spirits, so what could be more natural? And if somebody is coming through with love and wants to help you with love and give healing and give guidance and give whatever they want to give, and you accept it in that spirit, what can possibly be wrong with that?
That's exactly what I say. And even if it was, let's just say, a placebo effect, what's wrong with that either? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. And to many, it might be a placebo effect because, as I said, unless you have the experience for yourself, which is why I never try to persuade people. I always say, look, unless you have what I've very gratefully been given to be able to hear and see spirits, I wouldn't expect you to believe it. In fact, I wouldn't even ask you to believe it. And I often rather jokingly say to people, please don't believe a single word I ever tell you, because what I want you to do is find your own truth. I don't want you to just accept that I'm telling you this or that. I will gladly, happily share with you my life experience, my life's knowledge, everything I learned through the forensic study of philosophy, everything I've learned through spiritual development, everything I've learned from taking an interest in science and religion, everything I will gladly share that with you. But I will hopefully say to you, please find your own truth, just as the spirit guides did for me. And in telling me that also said, and if anything offends your reason, reject it. Wow, hallelujah. Because otherwise people are saying, no, you will believe this, you will do this because it is written in a certain book, or somebody in a flowing robe is standing up there telling you that that's the way it is. And I went through a period in my life where I had to fight very hard and reject all that and say, no, I'm searching for truth. I can't accept the status quo as it is because it doesn't give me all the answers. Why am I seeing and hearing all these people? Why am I being given all this love from the spiritual dimensions? Why are they telling me that things can be different, that people can live in harmony, and that there can be more compassion in the world and more trust, and just people living together and looking after one another and the planet and the animals and everything? And that being shown to me, how can I possibly go against that and say, I'm going to pursue one particular creed, and if you're not part of my label, I'm going to hate you, I'm going to want to fight you, or whatever it might be? I can't accept that.
You know, on this show, I have very wide variety of life coaches that come on, and they all have their different ways of approaching things, but
Sure.
they all see success in their own way, and they help people. And you know, you always want to go out and find the one that best suits you.
Yep.
And so my journey and the things that I've gone through spiritually, I will be glad to share that with you. I'm like you. You know, if you want to know, I'll be glad to give you my story. And it's just my story. This is what's worked for me. If you think it would work for you, great. If you don't, great. I don't believe in shoving your beliefs down other people's throats.
100%, 100%. And
Yeah.
Just be a free thinker, find your own truth. If it interests you, as I say, you can read Revelation just as a thriller. It's a story in its own right, and you can take it at that face value.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to look deeper, if you want to read deeper, there's a lot of depth in it, and then you can find things which I think will resonate. But it's up to the individual, and it's entirely, you know, what you want to make of it or don't want to make of it. And I think that's the beauty of it in many ways.
I mean, can't I still respect you without agreeing with you?
Absolutely. Oh, 100%. I love debate. I absolutely love debate. What I find disappointing is closed minds.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody will not even countenance that there could be another argument, that there could be another side to the story. In any situation, even in the worst situations, you've got to say, well, why are people acting in that way? Why is this happening? And then you come to some kind of understanding. But if people come with closed minds, I do find that disappointing. Yes.
Yeah, it really is. And the whole purpose behind the show, once again, is that I like to bring alternative ways of thinking. There's not, you know, some answers aren't absolute. I mean, except for, you know, 1 + 1 is going to equal 2, no matter how you look at it. But there's certain things that you can say, hey, this is going to be different for somebody else. So, but I want to give people that opportunity to say, hey, well, let me try this, let me try that. It's hard to explain off the top of my head, but that's the way I feel about it.
Well, you're absolutely right, Kyle. And some of this is actually in my book as well, but it's done in a very light touch way. It's not heavy at all. You know, I don't want people to get the impression that there's a lot of sort of heavy philosophizing in there or anything, but it does touch upon it, because that sort of 1 + 1 = 2. Yes, it's the sort of thing that we studied in philosophy to really understand, well, what is knowledge? What do we really understand? But something that I've included within Revelation is the fact that, you know, we construct our world out of our 5 senses. So what we can see, hear, feel, touch, taste, smell, that creates our world. But then we have to extrapolate from that and say, hang on a minute, there are animals around and about us who have senses of taste, touch, smell, feel, etc., far, far more heightened than ours. You know, dogs have a sense of smell, which I believe is something like 1,000 times greater than ours, or whatever the multiple is. It's extraordinary. Whales can navigate around the globe and you know, swim from corner to corner and arrive back in the same bay every year. Bats can fly around in darkened caves without bumping into each other in their thousands, because they have a sense of radar far more enhanced than ours. An eagle flying high in the sky has panoramic vision, yet can pinpoint a hare 2 miles down on the ground and swoop down and pick it up. Animals have far, far more heightened senses than ours. And if you're in a room where there's a spirit presence, as millions of people will tell you, their dog or cat will pick that up and the hackles will rise and they'll think, well, what's going on here? A bit like when I was a kid and I could hear spirits. I thought, hang on, this is out of the ordinary. What's happening here? To them, they don't understand that there's something outside of their sensory experience. But that's the point in the book as well, is saying, well, hang on a minute. If these things exist, in just in the physical sense, in the animal kingdom, then why is it such a big step to accept that there are greater things in the sensory world than we understand? And there are scenes in the book as well. There's a scene where there's a television on and somebody switches it off and one of the people says, well, the television waves are still in the room, aren't they? There's a discussion about it. And that's absolutely right. You can't see them, but they're still in the room. And the analogy is made because obviously spirit presence is still all around and about us. People tend to talk about heaven and earth, heaven and hell, because that's how they've been brought up. It's not like that at all. They're around and about us. In fact, people who've had near-death experiences have often described it as literally stepping into another room. They are that close to us, which is wonderful. And it's not just the one world. There are many spirit dimensions, as I'm sure you understand as well, Kyle. But these are vast, vast subjects. And rather than close them off to us, I think the more we investigate them, the more we come to accept them, the better the world will be for it. And where we started in this chat, where you were talking about energy, is the way we will do it. And that's how revelation is created. It's a device that can pick up the energetic vibrations of the spirit world. And that's how we come to create the story. So huge, huge subjects, but they are fascinating, everyone.
Well, I can definitely get into those, anything paranormal or spiritual.
Yeah.
I love to talk about. I'm probably one of the biggest skeptics, even though I'm a believer, but that just makes, our journey, that much more, I guess, relevant, because we love the skepticism. It makes us work harder.
Absolutely. It's good to be skeptical. It's absolutely good to be skeptical. It's what pushed me into studying philosophy, because there are few more studies which are more skeptical, more analytic, more forensic in their studies of what human existence is all about than philosophy. And analytical logic is probably one of the most useful things I've ever studied in my life, and has stood me in good stead throughout. But it's good to be skeptical. To this day, I don't just accept things as I think, well, was that spirit just talking to me, or what? You do need to have a certain skepticism. But I think once you push through that and are convinced, which I can only be because I have those experiences, then it opens up an incredible world.
Now, one thing that I subscribe to that I've heard different people talk about is that there is a universal consciousness that which is the reasoning behind the I guess getting to that higher frequency. We're all trying to strive for that. And it also explains why a person can have an idea on one side of the earth and then somebody else have the same exact idea on the opposite side of the earth and have never talked or anything. Is that there's, which I believe is God, is that that one consciousness amongst all of us. What's your thoughts on that?
I 100% subscribe to that. Not in the sense of one God necessarily in that sense, but a universal consciousness, 100%. And I've actually seen it happen many times in life. I work in the creative industries myself. I'm an advertising copywriter, and I've seen it happen. My whole work is about coming up with ideas, creating new ads, etc. And I've seen it happen that people somehow out of nothing, we all seem to arrive at the same idea. And that can happen. And there are things, people have had to sue each other for songs that they claim have been stolen. They probably haven't. It's just that people were tapping into the same idea, whether it be art, films, you name it. It happens. And there is that universal consciousness. And I think, again, it's that ability to tap into that. It's there for all of us. It is there. And it goes back to that aspect that there isn't just the one spirit dimension when we pass across. Yes, we pass into the spirit world, but there are many dimensions of spirit. And we're on a journey. But what exactly the ultimate expression of that universal consciousness is, none of us can know. That, for want of a better word, that Godhead or Great Spirit or whatever, we can't possibly get our finite human brains around what that might be. All we know is that we are part of something huge, that there is this universal consciousness that we can tap into. yeah, people get similar ideas at the same time. People have similar thoughts, and then you start thinking about, is this where telepathy comes in? That there are people, the Aborigines, for example, very much believe in the practice of it, that you could be thinking something and somebody else can pick that up because you're sending out particular messages. There are countless examples of that people tell the most extraordinary stories of that kind of thing happening. Each one of these is a vast subject that we could talk about individually at length, because they are so fundamental to the whole aspect of spirituality. And I hope that more and more humankind will get into trying to discover more about these things, purely because I think it will do us all good, that it will help us to live in harmony and peace and toleration.
Well, I hope we can go back to the way things used to be, because the way the world is now, I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? There's some wonderful people out there, and they have a great message to give, but unfortunately, it's just like this world is all about, I don't know, controversy, and it's not about harmony anymore.
Yeah.
And that's,
but I think
that's
the people
sad.
who've got the message of love and toleration and compassion and harmony and all the rest of it have to keep going, have to keep trying, have to keep putting that thought out there and trying to show it. And I think particularly at the end of my book Revelation, without giving anything away, it is a beautifully life-affirming message that I've had people say to me it made them cry with happiness. And that heartens me immensely, because I want to give a message of hope, a message of positivity, a message of this is how it could be. And hopefully the book does that. So it's very uplifting at the end.
Well, I'm hoping that we've got some people curious about it. So if they want to get the book, where would they go?
It's available on most online bookstores. Obviously, we all think of Amazon, but it's available on most online bookstores. And it's also available direct from the publisher, Cranthorpe Milner. Cranthorpemilner.com is the website to go on, and you can order it direct from there. Or actually, I think you can go into a lot of bookshops and they'll order it from you. They'll find the ISBN number and they'll order it for you. So it's widely available. It's also on electronic books as well. So should be relatively easy to pick up.
Now, do you have your own website?
Not for Revelation or anything like that. I'm on Instagram, but I don't promote it through a dedicated website. No. As I say, my main job is as an advertising copywriter. That's what I do for a living. I don't make a living out of being a spiritual medium or anything. I wouldn't want to. To me, it's an adjunct to what I am, what I do. But I have a serious, very, very busy, crazy life as an advertising copywriter, always chasing deadlines, but I love it. I love the creative process. So no, not a website for Revelation itself, but I am on Instagram if anybody wants to search me out. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you can give me the links to the book, and I can put that in the description.
Yeah, thanks. I'll do that, Kyle. Yeah, I'll send you that.
I'm sure folks out there are going to want to read it, and I'm looking forward to reading the whole thing. So
yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed. I'm sure with your knowledge and your views on life, you will, because it will speak to you, and you'll think, yeah, that I get that.
Or as my wife would say, in spite of my knowledge.
Yeah, well.
Well, yeah. Nick, I appreciate you coming on. I know it's evening time where you're at.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and there's so much else obviously we could talk about outside of my book in terms of spirituality, the paranormal, etc., etc. So I'd love to chat again, but thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, of course. And to all of you out there, I want to thank you for joining us. If you are new to the channel, I'd ask that you please subscribe, and for those of you who are regular, thank you for your support. Until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network